Greetings, my friends, everywhere out there. I truly, truly hope that you have had the best Christmas season ever, and that the coming new year will bring you much good, blessings, benefits, and may everything come your way that you desire. And hopefully when this year is over, which is a long way off now, you can look back and say it was a good year. 13 was a good year for me, and yet I was glad to get it behind. I'm not a superstitious person, but for some reason, I wanted 13 behind. You know, I don't know how it is now, but years ago when I traveled a lot, I'd stay in these big high-storied hotels, you know, and you might notice, and even on some office buildings, there was never a floor 13. They always skipped that. That number was always left out. People are a bit superstitious. I don't know why, but 13 doesn't hurt you more than anything else. Like one old man said, I hope I don't die this year. I'd hate to have 2013 chiseled on my tombstone. Well, I'm not that worrying about it, but some way or another I felt relieved when it was over. Now, if you heard my last program, you know about my family belief in Old Christmas, which was the 6th of January. Well, that day has passed also. But here at Pleasant Hill, there's almost 400 cards on the walls. Yeah. I'll take this opportunity to say thank you for the cards you sent. Honestly, I got some that I don't know who they were from. The name is not familiar to me. But I figured it was somebody out there, either in my TV viewing land or my radio hearing land, that sent them. Today, I'm going to tell you a story of an old cabin. Soon I should have an article in the Bristol paper concerning the first houses built in this country. Not that I've named any certain houses more or less, but just how the old pioneer settlers came in here. And the first thing they had to think about was a shelter. It's actually true that a few families I know about lived under bluffs, overhanging cliffs on the mountainside until they could build a home. Some people made dugouts in the ground and covered them over for temporary homes until they could cut logs and build the houses. Virtually every early house in the country was made of logs, and that was whether you're rich or poor or in between. I think of the old Preston clan that moved into this country, blue bloods from eastern Virginia, originally from Ireland, and yet up at exit 7, above exit 7, where they first built a home, it was all log. And the back kitchen, out in the yard kitchen, is still standing there today. The old logs are beginning to rot, but we're trying to make a good effort to save those logs and keep it as a symbol of what people had to endure here early. Now, this log cabin that I'm going to center this little speech around, still stands, and you can see it. I'll tell you where in a little bit. Way down below Bristol proper, that is below downtown Bristol, about 4, maybe 5 miles, on Beaver Creek, there's a big bend in the creek called Holly Bend. The Ordway Cemetery is in that bend up on the hill. There's a car agency now that covers for Phillips Wood Drive, turns away from the Volunteer Parkway and runs into a subdivision back there. There used to be a tourist court of sorts at the mouth of that road called Phillips Court. They're distant relatives of mine, very distant, of course, the name is there. But 99 feet or so from the middle of the highway is the site of the old Colonel James King home, one of the pioneer settlers here. I measured that distance on the first day of 1990. It happened to be a beautiful day, and we went down there and measured it. I said then, there's going to be commercial development here, and I want to know that we can more or less identify the spot where the Colonel James King home stood. I think it was 99.5 feet from the center of the road to that place. I'm not sure of that. It's in my book, I think, that I wrote soon afterwards. But he, of course, built a log house there and built slave cabins around it of logs. Everything on the place was log. He had a furniture shop made of logs. Now, much later, the old Colonel King home was weatherboarded over and added to and made a pretty nice old house out of it. But it was torn down to make room for another house. Well, actually, another new house was built right in front of it. And then when they got the new house built, they tore the old house down. Well, as I say, he had several slaves, and they were living in cabins nearby. And one morning, the early peaceful dawning was rent by 3 or 4 terrorized cries from some of the slaves. And he wondered what on earth is happening down in the slave village. It actually spread out down the hill behind his house there. And he was shocked to wake up to the women especially were screaming like some awful thing was about to happen. He jumped out of bed, grabbed his trusty old rifle. He was an old Revolutionary War soldier, and ran to the front porch of the house and looked down that way. And all he could make out one scream of an old lady, one of the older slaves, was Indian, Indian, Indian. Well, he looked a little further down, and behold, a large old blanket-covered Indian was sitting under a tree down by the slave village. He was not afraid of him, but the slaves still, they had heard of atrocious things committed by the Indians against the white settlers, and they immediately assumed that this was a savage, ready to attack them. As it was a gentle, peaceful old man. He strangely could speak very fluent English. It surprised the people when he spoke. He introduced himself like a refined gentleman to old Colonel King. And he said, "I am Chief Smoking Basket." Smoking Basket? Well, unusual names in the Indian tribes, not unusual. I've known them being called Greasy Blanket and Bear Walla, and I don't know what all, but they would name themselves very strange things sometimes. "I am Chief Smoking Basket. I've walked many, many miles to come to this place." As it turned out, Chief Smoking Basket, very old apparently at the time, had lived near the mouth of Steel Creek, just above where the King home is, or was, when he was a young man. He had hunted in the woods. He knew the every hollow around there. He knew where every spring was. He knew it all. It was plain that he was telling the truth, that he had lived in that area at one time. And he said, "I've come back. I want to view my old hunting ground. And I will tell you something else just a little later. I'll try to make something pleasing to us both. But I want the privilege of staying here for a while. Indeed, I would like to spend the rest of my life here. I don't think it will be very long." Well, it happened that they had a slave cabin that was empty at the time, so they put the big old chief. He was a large Indian, very large. They thought he stood at least 6.5 feet or more tall, and was very large with it. No wonder the slave woman was scared to death. She saw such a giant of a man that she deemed to be a savage. And as it turned out, he was not a savage. But the deal went through that he could stay there in that slave cabin until we could arrange something else. Finally, he told Colonel King that my family left treasure buried in this area, and if you will be kind to me, I think I know where it is. That's about all we know. Probably it has been told in the family that King probably did get the treasure, whatever it was, because soon afterwards he bought a big plantation in the Sweetwater Valley below Loudon, Tennessee, way down below Knoxville. And they thought he financed it with an unusual amount of money from somewhere. He was already wealthy. He didn't have to worry about money. But some of the family, one of his granddaughters wrote a book called A King on Beaver. And she tells this story in that book. That's where I first heard it. And the family, I mentioned to some of the elderly family members at the time, and they remembered hearing the story. Well, anyway, he said, if you will allow me to live the rest of my days on this property here, I will share the wealth with you when I find it. I think I know how I can find it. Well, King made the deal with him. Old Father King, as they called him, was ever on to anything that made him a little richer. So he was a grand old Irishman, but he did love money. Well, for good reason. He helped finance the location, buying of the site where Memphis, Tennessee is located. And he also supplied the money for the upper northeast gateway to Tennessee. So actually he did a lot for us. Well, the chief wanted to have a little cabin built at the mouth of Steel Creek. And so King put his slaves to work, and they built him a nice, huge log cabin with a cut stone chimney to it. Very, very nice. It's just one big room, but that was very common. I know of one old house in this area, it's torn down now, about 18 by 20 it was, and they told me that 12 people lived in it one time. Can you imagine 12 people in a 18 by 20 room? Well, anyway, they built a comfortable, large cabin for him. He slept in that cabin, he ate in that cabin, and the King even allowed him to have a garden spot. He made a garden spot there in the mouth of Steel. Now, this is about where the Rooster Front Park is. We can identify it now. And if any of my viewers know how Rooster Front Park got its name, I'd love to tell me. I get that question over and over again, and I can't answer it. I don't know. Well, the chief lived out his days in that old cabin. King died in 1825. Now, the chief died in 1813. But King died in 1825. After that, the property was sold to a Bushong family, and they went ahead and ran the works. Now, after the chief died, King used that building for his place for an office for the ironworks. You see, he had a big ironworks in the mouth of Steel Creek. There's a sign out on the highway now that makes a statement about it. Frankly, it has an error in it. We might as well face it. It wasn't the first ironworks in Tennessee, as the sign proclaims. But nevertheless, that's not the first error that ever went and meddled with the highway, and it won't be the last. I can show you a lot of them. Well, anyway, he used it for his office and bedroom. When there's making a run of iron, you see, he'd go up there and sleep that night. And that was his bedroom. Finally, it was turned into a tenant house on the Bushong farm, and later the Trigg family got it, and finally it went into the Ordway Company, and that's how the Ordway Cemetery got its name. Then came the time when Bristol, Tennessee was going to make a sewer plant there, and they were about to tear the cabin down and throw it away. But luckily, Mrs. Virginia Caldwell, who was the grand dame of the Dairy Inn in Bluntville, Tennessee, heard about it. She paid $25 to get it and got prisoners from the jail to help her haul it. And she went over there and loaded it on a truck, was the overseer of the prisoners, and they hauled that to Blunteville, Tennessee. It was re-erected behind the Dairy Inn. You may find it today. You can walk right down in the yard and see that cabin where it was made for Beaver. Now, they call it the King Cabin, and in a sense that's right, but it's farther back than that. It's actually the chief's cabin. And they've got a sign on it identifying it as the King Cabin. My good friend Randolph had it restored, paid the bill to have it restored, and it is there to be seen today. Now, in the next show, I'll tell you what Chief Smoking Basket did for that area, and I will explain how he got the name. Until we meet again, may the best in life be yours.